Hello and welcome to GaulCast. I'm Oigetocariâ.
And I'm Branagara.
And this is What is Gaulish Polytheism? I'm super excited for this episode. For that, we should talk about the events that happened between now and last month. We had our Grove Assembly, or the Comreton Calleios, in the Gaul chat Discord server, and it went really, really well. I'm a little disappointed in how my presentation went because of how unprepared I was. I didn't make any slides, and I saw that everyone had slides. I got really nervous.
No, that's okay though. Not everybody's going to have slides. It's not that big of a deal. You did just fine.
Much appreciated. I got so hyped up and nervous that I just blew through my bullet points that it was supposed to last about 50 minutes. Ended up getting done with the whole thing in maybe 25, 30 minutes.
It's okay. You get talking and you get on a roll and it just kind of goes.
Yeah, I got really excited because it's not often that I get an audience that wants to hear me ramble and go on and on about the Helvetii tribe. So I got super excited and super nervous. And Nellis pointed out during the intermission that, because I work in like a factory setting, that I'm just kind of prone to blaze through my objectives and my tasks for the day. So all excuses aside, no, it was a lot of fun. Got some good questions afterwards. And then, of course, the other speakers were phenomenal. We had Kuno Belanus, who we're going to hear in a little bit. Segamaros got some better equipment so we could actually hear him. Sure, his internet kept cutting in and out, but still, really, really good session by Segamaros. We had others as well.
Nellos, and then we also had Morpheus Ravenna and Branos.
Yeah, Morpheus always has something really cool to talk about, present, as does Nellos and Kuno. Branos, we got to watch him work and talk in his shop a little bit. Nice long discussion on smithing and crafting, just really, really cool stuff, as always with Branos.
I enjoy listening to Branos talk, mostly because he has this fantastic tendency to just get on a topic and just go everywhere with it. And I enjoy that. I enjoy listening to him talk.
It's always awesome to listen to Branos talk, because guy's definitely not shy at all.
No, he's not.
Best part about listening to Branos talk is how often he uses the word chill. Because it's chill.
And it was chill.
And sometimes things are not chill. And when they're not chill, it's not cool.
And our listeners will experience Branos on this podcast at some point in time. And he's very entertaining to listen to.
One thing Branos and I have in common is that while English is our first language, neither one of us are very good at it. But all kidding aside, Branos is very, very wise and insightful. And his sites, the Carnutian Nematon, is great and filled with awesome information. Site, the Carnutian Workshop, you can buy a lot of his crafts, divination tools, board games like TOEFL, all kinds of really neat stuff from there. Both of those can be found at GaulishPolytheism.com.
He has a ring on there I want to get.
I think I know which one you're talking about. My fiance saw one on there that was like a little leafy looking thing, and she's like, "Oh, I need it."
It's a leaf one that's dedicated to Carnonos, and he's been my patron for a decade and a half, so I'm like, I want it.
Well, before we get any more sidetracked, today we are talking with Cunobelinus Bettulicnos. He is the guy in charge of the Gaul chat Discord server. He's the head of the GaulCast. Really, really cool, very smart guy. We thought he would be the best guy to have on to talk about Gaulish Polytheism 101.
Yeah, I agree. It's a really great interview. I enjoyed doing it. I, of course, asked some pretty basic questions, but, got to be there for people. You're going to hear us refer to Cunobelinus as Cuno, and that is largely because that is what we regularly call him, and it's much shorter than his Gaulish name.
Kuno Belanus essentially means Hound of Bel or Hound of Belanus. So when we say Kuno, we're basically just calling them hound or dog. Kind of like when people say Arto instead of Oigetocariâ, they're just calling me Bear. Hey there, Bear. How's it going, Bear?
So go ahead and stick with us, and we will be moving right into that interview.
We are here with Cunobelinus Bettulicnos. And why don't you explain who you are, buddy? And
Hey, thanks for having me, guys. I've been a Gaulish Polytheist for several years. I've had my tour around Tumblr and WordPress, and I've currently been, for the past while, the administrator of the GaulChat Discord server, as well as the current Orcobretos of Tutelation since August of this year, 2020.
can you explain what that role is?
Well, the Orcobretos is the chief magistrate of Tutelation, which is an umbrella organization for all types of Gaulish polytheists. So it involves just a lot of, admin work, ideas, and just getting people organized,
The main topic at hand, and the reason we have you here, is we're going to go over, very excited that we're doing this, just Gaulish Polytheist 101. What is Gaulish Polytheism?
I'm going to go ahead and ask what's going to be probably a pretty simple question. In your opinion, what is polytheism?
Well, polytheism is kind of like an expansion on animism, which is a belief that there's spirits in all things, where to the point where these spirits are much more significant and they are worshipped as deities, and there are many of them, and the world's just filled with them. And while you may worship some and just acknowledge the presence of others, we're just ideas that we're just surrounded by gods all the time.
In your opinion, what is Gaulish Polytheism?
Well, as they say, you don't quite know something unless you can, sum it up simply. So I'd say that Gaulish polytheism is the practices and customs of the people of ancient Gaul and how they're interpreted today.
Gaul is what is now France, Belgium, and Switzerland. And this is something I have heard a few people say, but and this is kind of a rhetorical question, but would one have to be French, Belgium, or Swiss? Does bloodline matter, I guess, is where I'm driving at.
Well, there are definitely modern ethnicities in those regions today, but you have to think about, one, the fact that it has been over 2,000 years, and just bloodlines don't really last that long. They mix, they split off, they become unique in their own ways. But even then, the concept of Gaulishness didn't really exist. The term Gaul was, is what Julius Caesar referred to that land of, the land of Gaul, when they didn't really see themselves as one people, like in that same sense, because what is Gaulish is basically a shared linguistic, cultural, and religious tradition, which even then, looking into it, these things can be very varied, and there's no hard definition of what these three things are, because there's multiple Gaulish dialects. Every single time you would go to look at a different clan, household, nation, tribe, they all have their own varied traditions and gods they venerate. And it's just the kind of idea that it spreads from the Gauls to nearby cultures. So over time, because they had such an influential culture, they would influence others, and just more and more tribes and peoples would become Gaulish, and there was no kind of idea of ethnicity in that sense, where it's just those three tenets is what makes a Gaul. It's never it's like what language you spoke, which gods you worshipped, what kind of customs you followed. That's what really determined what kind of people you were back then, and just doesn't exist in the same way that we see it today, because it's just much more a modern concept. So, there is no Gaulish bloodline there never really was. If you do really want to look at it nitty gritty, then there would be many different Gaulish bloodlines. But at the same time, just the way that Gaulish customs spread was never through bloodlines. Generally, it was through just the influence of the very powerful culture that other people would look at and be like, "Hey, this is cool. I want to do it too."
I couldn't agree more. One thing I like to add when that kind of question comes up is that when Rome came through and kind of assimilated, and then after that, the Germanic tribes, that also really kind of muddies the bloodline thing, because there was a lot of assimilation, intermarrying, and all the types of different mixing of cultures, and it eventually developed to what it is today. So in a way, a Gaulish bloodline, like you said, never really was one singular distinct thing. But over time, a modern bloodline doesn't exist. But at the same time, if you are of Northern European descent, odds are you have a Gaulish ancestor here or there.
Yeah, I mean that's very, very true. Like you said, like Roman, Germanic, when like France in its early infancy would go and assimilate the minorities very, very aggressively, to the point of like wiping them out in some cases. The people living in the lands of France it is very, very difficult to trace any of them back to Gaulish tribes. Even in, going back to Julius Caesar again, he described that the people of Gaul were kind of aware of the fact, and even as much as proud of the fact, that they were one part from the islands, one part indigenous, and one part Germanic. Even going into that, the Gauls very much knew themselves as not a homogenous group, and that was just the way that their culture was. It was never locked to any bloodline. It was freely shared with their trading partners and their allies.
Yeah, and I wanted to bring this up because there are certain Facebook groups and just groups here and there, like on Reddit and whatnot, that think that bloodline is a requirement for spirituality, and I think all of us here can agree that that is absolute nonsense.
It's sometimes used as an excuse for racism, which is, if you look at it from a historical context, even very lightly, you'll see that is bullshit. This is a problem that is much, much more prevalent in Norse polytheism, but it does sometimes happen in Gaulish polytheism. But I feel like as a community, we've done a really, really good job to spread this kind of message that there is no such thing as Gaulish ethnicity, and just maintaining our values and protecting our community from these types of racist individuals. And it's, as a result, we've built a very beautiful community.
Absolutely, yeah.
We've established that there's no specific bloodlines. You don't require to be from X country to be a Gaulish polytheist. Now, with most polytheism, there is pantheons. There's pretty well-defined pantheons. Is there a Gaulish pantheon?
I mean, yes and no. There's a lot of Gaulish gods. There's almost 500 or over 500? Over 500. But, you would go to any particular nation or tribe and ask them what gods they followed. You would get a very different answer. They would have their individual pantheons for, those nations, tribes, clans, even households. They would worship their own set of gods. But there was no sense of an enclosed pantheon or hierarchy that you would see in the other European pantheons. It was very much, loose, broad,
so more tribal than, say, the Greek pantheon, where Zeus is in charge and Hera is his sister wife, and all of that. Or don't judge. Or with the Egyptians, or with Odin being the leader of the Norse pantheon, things like that. It's more tribal.
Yes, I would agree. It's much more tribal. However, there are elements that seem to have been passed from the common ancestor of Proto-Indo-European polytheism, of the kind of the Lord Giant Slayer type god. You would see that in Tyrannus, and several other kind of roles that you could maybe fit into similar kind of hierarchies. But the thing is that was never really solidified. That was never really unified throughout Gaul. So it's there are the similar archetypes, but they didn't have that level of hierarchy.
As you both know, I do a lot of reconstruction with the Helvetii tribe specifically, and the various tribes of the Alpine region. something that I've noticed is that certain deities will kind of pop up frequently. I think the biggest one is Sukelos. He kind of pops up everywhere. Epona pops up a lot between these different tribes. I think that's
to be fair, Epona pops up across everything European.
True. But I think that's the closest thing to term I've used as like a universal Gaulish deity, and that only because I say that because they popped up in across tribes, whereas like RTO is very specific, Arduina is very specific, Paninos, they are more centralized to specific regions rather than popping up all over the place like Sokelos and Epona and Lugus.
Oh yeah, there are like definitely a lot more popular gods where we would see them like appear a lot more frequently in the inscription record. But honestly, at the end of the day, we don't really know how widespread a lot of these gods were. A lot of the time we can make educated guesses where saying like, okay, well, this god is the specific god of this tribe, so it wouldn't really make sense for them to really be prevalent outside of this tribe's area. And then there are those ones you say like Sukelos, and there's also like Belanus and Internus who just kind of appear in a lot more places, so the assumption is that, okay, well, we can easily say that these deities showed up a lot more, but, there are examples of deities that we only see one or two inscriptions of, but, we don't really know. They could have shown up a lot more. They could have been limited to a region. But yes, there's definitely a distinction between like major gods that appear everywhere and more highly localized ones.
So if you're not basing, and I'm sorry, I know I sound like I'm asking this as somebody who's not a Gaulish polytheist. I'm asking it for people who aren't Gaulish polytheists. If you're not basing it on a living tradition like some of the insular Celt tribes, like the Irish and the Welsh and things like that, and you're not basing it off of the well-written down history of the Greeks or the Egyptians, why reconstruct something when there's so little to go off of?
Well, I'm going to first open up and say that, I disagree with the idea that there's little to reconstruct. When you look at things like the Roman or the Egyptian, mythological cycles and pantheons, they don't really have to do much reconstructing. They just all have everything already. They just have it. But when we actually get into the trend of reconstructing here in Gaulish polytheism, you discover how much there actually is hidden in academic text. You can kind of discern through similarities in neighboring traditions. You can find a lot. You just need to, have that patience and have that focus to work and look for it. And I feel it is 100,000 times more rewarding when you put this together. Not to say that to be a Gaulish polytheist, you have to participate in this reconstruction, but there's an excitement in the building because it's like there's been a tremendous addition in knowledge and in what we know regarding the Gauls and their practices in just the past few years, where there's been information that has just been waiting to be found by anyone. Like, you don't need to be like a professor doing studies at a fancy university, just anyone to find. Where, Artocathos, I like using you as an example, where you've gone through the academic records and you found Gaulish deities who are just been completely lost to time and just been waiting for people to rediscover them. And this is something that, an ordinary person can do. And it is very exciting, especially in the community where you can know these people, even if you're not doing it yourself, these people who are putting the whole picture together. There's also a benefit of also not having a lot. You look at Gaelic polytheism. They have a lot of, not to judge or anything, they have a lot of difficulties agreeing on things because there is so much to look at for when it comes to interpretation. And then a lot of what they do know is recorded in the Christian era. So it's been more transformed. It's a lot of the kind of the original energy has been lost. So when it comes to Gaulish polytheism, we have almost, we're almost free of this potential discourse by missing some of these things, where it's not really necessary for us to have in order to practice and to worship, but it allows us to, grow closer as a community and not grow apart.
So with Gaulish polytheism, it more or less Gaul was gone by the time Christianization came along. So it's virtually untouched by it, correct?
For sure. Of course, there was there's arguments to be made of some pockets of some sort of post-Celtic traditions that kind of have a lot from the Gaulish era. But, between the Romans and the Germans moving in, that was already gone, which is honestly, in the long run, has been a positive thing, because from what I understand, going back to Ireland as an example, where it's yes, they're a living culture, but they have less to reconstruct from, because they have stories of St. Patrick going along and intentionally destroying old pagan sites. So across France and Belgium and Switzerland, we have a plethora of inscriptions, of ruins of temples. We have things to be found in the earth, while on the Isles they were intentionally destroyed much, much more recently.
To be fair, when I was doing my research on Paninos, he did have a Gallo-Roman era temple that was destroyed by Christians, and actually the Christian king, I want to say wasn't Constantine? Anyway, a Roman emperor, I think, king, I don't know, a very famous royal person actually applauded these these looters for destroying the temple.
There you go. Where, yeah, of course it still happens. Where, France, there isn't any kind of surviving temple as you would see in Greece, and to any of that kind of.
For the most part, you are right. They a lot of it is preserved. A lot of the inscriptions can still be found. Whereas, like you said, over in Ireland and Scotland, a lot of it was destroyed by Christians, and there's a lot more, or it's a lot harder to find evidence and inscriptions over there. Whereas in mainly France, I would say, and probably parts of Belgium, a lot of the there's a lot of museums that are filled with very well preserved artifacts that from what I've seen.
For sure, and I would even go far, as to say, that these artifacts among the insular Celts were more than destroyed; they were eradicated, and it's such a mind-boggling idea that in France, there are just inscriptions that are they are out in the open, on the side of a road or kind of incorporated into a town.
It's funny you say that, because when in a lot of my research there, again, Switzerland, I believe it's Verdun, there's a large gathering of monoliths that, according to some travel site, it's there. It hasn't been touched, and the funny thing that I found is that it's kind of labeled as an inconvenience to get to, because it's very much out of the way. You have to hike to get there.
Oh, yeah.
I'm up for it. Let's do it. You've referenced insular Celts, and I've referenced in the past calling Gaulish continental Celts. Can you tell us what the difference between insular Celt and a continental Celt is?
Oh, well, that's simple. Continental Celts are the Celtic cultures found on the European continent, while the insular Celts are the main ones found on the Isles. So insular would be both kinds of Gaelic, Irish, Scottish, Brythonic, Irish Age, Brythonic, and all the descendant traditions such as Cornish and Welsh and Breton. And then continental would include Gaulish and its many pieces you can break it down into, as well as Hispano-Celtic and Celtiberian, which falls under Hispano-Celtic.
So even though, as Gaulish Polytheists, we're still a fairly small community, we have been growing a lot lately. I know that you personally have had a hand in building a lot of online, kind of safe haven communities for the learning and teaching of Gaulish Polytheists. I know there's obviously the Tauta Galation Facebook page, and Gaulish Polytheist Facebook page, where I believe Sigamaros runs that. I know you personally have put a lot of work in the Discord server. What's your opinion on how these online communities are growing and becoming more open to the new and up and coming Gaulish Polytheists?
A lot of the times, when it comes to these types of online communities. You gotta really have the right platform that suits your needs. Earlier on, when I was still, a baby Gaulish Polytheist, I was much more active on Tumblr. And there I actually had a Skype group where about a dozen or so of us would talk and interact in a Skype group. And, those of you who know, a single Skype group doesn't really leave room to grow as far as community goes. So I did, make a Discord server when Discord was still also quite young and baby, because it was nowhere near the kind of community hub it is today as far as like features and everything goes. So, for a year or two, that GaulChat Discord server was just kind of was very quiet. There was only about, a dozen people on it. I was focusing on other things at the time, just renewed focus every little while and just having it open and having it present for people to come and ask questions, even if it was, completely silent for weeks on end. Someone new would come in interested. I would send them the resources I have, and it would go back to quiet again. But it's just like, the most important thing about community building is having that community space available and having it functional and working. Like the current iteration of the GaulChat Discord server is massive. And, as far as polytheist servers go, Discord, I've been around a couple polytheist servers where general, like pagan servers, you can get several thousand people in these Discords, but it's really hard to break, a couple hundred people in polytheist servers. So setting over 250 people, that has been, just been a lot of work and hard work on everyone's part of just, keeping the conversation going, keeping people interested. And it's just been a fantastic platform as far as, getting people interested and active in Gaulish polytheism. I've seen other platforms for this. There was the Facebook. Facebook kind of has like the, you kind of post, people comment, and that's worked for them. And I've recently been made a moderator of the Gaulish Polytheism Facebook community, and it's much more quiet, but there's a lot more people. It's like 900 people, so it kind of does really help get an idea of how many Gauls there are, but it doesn't really provide that community aspect and that kind of sharing of ideas that we do see in GaulChat. I do want to give a quick shout out to the Amino server, the Amino chat, which is there for Gaulish Polytheism. And it really helps get like the younger generation who are exploring polytheism, like older teenagers. Well, most of us in GaulChat are over the age of 18, but it provides that kind of, that space for them that works to their level of, their type of communication. So, there isn't really any kind of in-person spaces for Gauls right now, but just having those multiple spaces in Facebook, Discord, and Amino attracts different kinds of people who all share something in common. So I feel like just the online spaces, as they kind of become more suited for online communities, it really helps the community grow as a whole.
Just recently, we've already had two Gallic conferences, and we just had the Grove Assembly a couple weeks back. I'm still a little embarrassed of how quick my presentation went, but I was still happy with it, and it seemed to have done really, really, really well. We had Segamaros on there, you were on there, Branos was at his forge talking about a bunch of cool stuff. It was very, very cool to see how, in the short time I've been in the server, how we went from, it was just a small little chatty group to, we have our own, our own Grove Assembly now. No small part in, to you there, buddy.
It's always been a group effort by everyone, and I definitely feel as we grow, our rate of growth is, exponential. It has been truly a beautiful snowball effect to witness. Years ago, I would have never have dreamed of something like we did with the Comreton, and it just worked out so well, and I look forward to more of those. The idea is that as we get more and more passionate people in the community, we're going to be creating more and more beautiful things. You got your podcast up and running. We have that the assembly, tutelation has really kicked itself up a couple notches. it's just like the community is really shifting into faster and faster gears as we're all kind of working together towards our shared goals. And it's just been wonderful to watch for me as well, because, before you joined the community, things were definitely a lot slower. And I'm not saying it's all because of you, but just to say in a point where, it's just in the past year and a half where we have really, really gotten our pace going. And I look forward to continuing this pace.
Yeah, no, I just got lucky. I showed up at the right time, and that's when everything started picking up. It had nothing to do with me.
It's your charming personality.
Oh, yeah, charming.
Even in the last 6-9 months that I've been here, which I think is 6 or 7 months, just from when I've joined, it's grown exponentially.
For sure. I mean, Segermaus did a wonderful job creating and maintaining and growing Tudigalation from its inception, because Tudigalation is actually not that new. I think it was 2016 when it started, but I feel like with Segermaus kind of passing the torch on to us, we've been really able to kind of take his vision to brand new heights, even just in the past few months since the election in August, and myself and Branos were elected to the Excellos, the High Council of Tudigalation. We have done some pretty amazing things, and I look forward to continuing the year and just, more and more out. And, when the February meeting comes along, I do intend to announce that I will be running again. It's been fun, and it's been stressful, but it's been fun.
Yeah. I couldn't have said it better myself. Well, thank you so much for being on and hanging out with us and talking. And we'll definitely have you on later on down the road as we...
Forge forward.
Yes. Blazing Trails, we'll have you on some more. Yeah, thank you so much for coming on here, Kuno.
It was a pleasure, and I look forward to seeing GaulCast grow and, you upping your quality with every episode. So have a good one.
Me too. Thank you.
Hope you guys enjoyed that interview with Kuno Belanus. I know we had a good time hanging out with them.
Yeah, it was enjoyable.
For the virtue this episode, we are covering Oigetocariâ or Oigetocariâ. This means hospitality, guest friendliness, generosity. Renegara, what does this virtue mean to you?
So for me, a lot of what this means is making sure that you're hospitable, that your space is comfortable for everyone, but also that it's comfortable for you. Because if you're not comfortable in your space, nobody else is going to be comfortable in it either. And guest friendliness, hospitality, generosity, guest friendliness really does mean that your guests should behave themselves while they are in your space. And it's our job to enable a safe space for them.
In a historical context, hospitality was a cardinal virtue. Whether it's in Gaul, Greece, Rome, Scandinavia, Germany, hospitality was a very big deal. Off the top of my head, various Greek myths, hospitality is one of those things right under hubris that will piss off the gods. In the Havamal, which I believe is in the Poetic Edda, we have various parables, stories, all relating to hospitality and how that was paramount in the Norse culture. Across cultures, hospitality was a very big deal, both as a guest and as a host.
Hospitality and behaving yourself both as a guest and as a host is found across almost all cultures, anywhere in history for the most part. As we know it today, as hospitality and hospitality management in like the commercial sort of sense, that started in the 16th century after the French Revolution. But the sort of hospitality we're talking about in a historical context is going to be something that spans across almost in some form or manner across all cultures throughout history. It's been around for thousands of years.
Hospitality was a social construct that you did not want to violate that. Either you didn't want to be a bad host, you did not want to be a bad guest. That was something you did not want associated with you. You did not want that tagged along to your name.
No, like you want to make sure your guests are comfortable. You want to make sure that you extend your help to them, make sure that they know you enjoy their company, give them personal space, make sure you pay attention to the details, things like that. And in return, they frequently would bring gifts to give the host for letting them stay there. It's just kind of one of those things where it's in return, they're well behaved. They speak to you respectfully. They conduct themselves in your home respectfully. There's, generally people aren't violent. Violence was discouraged. Kind of loud arguments or yelling at each other, which is basically verbal violence, was also discouraged. So it's just kind of one of those things where it's a give and take with hospitality. You provide them with this safe place to be and ensure that they're comfortable and happy, and in return, they basically are on their best behavior.
In more of a modern context, and I'm going to admit a bit of a guilty pleasure here, but I like to go on YouTube and Facebook and check out these Karen videos. It's absolutely horrifying seeing full-grown adults going out and acting a fool. They're essentially breaking that social contract we've just been discussing. They don't show Oigetocariâ in any way. They're out in the world, technically guests in private businesses, public areas, and just violating hospitality, generosity, guest friendliness. There's none of that there.
They are, and a lot of it is because that social contract has, for the most part, been transferred from what it used to be into a more modern state, where even more recently, where it is the customer is always right, the guest is always right, except for that's not true. If someone's coming into my home to stay with me and they behave poorly and they're nasty and they're demanding and they don't appreciate that a home has been opened up to them, they're gone. They don't even get to stay for any length of time. I don't care if they're family. I don't care if they're friends. I don't care if they're strangers. If they're not going to be appreciative of the fact that I've opened my entire home to them and my personal life and my family to them and make them comfortable, and they're going to be terrible, they're leaving. They don't get to stay. And that goes for any space that I'm in.
And that's a situation that I've had to deal with before. Being a host, I've had in-laws or friends or just people over, and they're rude, whatever the circumstances are, and I've had to ask them to leave. It's not a great conversation to have, but it's one I've had to have because it just becomes a toxic environment if you have someone being an inhospitable guest in your home. And being a guest, I can think of a few occasions where I've been visiting family, and maybe I've gotten in a fight with a sibling, or maybe a relative and I have disagreed on something, and if I'm feeling unappreciated and looked down upon, or whatever the case may be, I'll leave. And I've done that before. I've just straight up left and felt no regret about it, and sometimes this is what you have to do.
I've been in that situation as well. It's a difficult one to be in. As a younger adult, I couldn't do that. And now that I'm, coming up on 40, I'm at the point in my life where I'm like, no, I don't need to put myself in this environment, and nobody needs to put themselves in that environment.
It's like what you said before. As the host, your job is to create that safe space, and as the guest, your job is to maintain that safe space. It just doesn't make any sense why people would go into a safe space and disrupt it and make it toxic and make it unsafe and unbearable for the people there.
I don't know. Some people, man. Some people.
This can also be applied to the whole COVID mask thing and anti-maskers. It's still part of that social construct. It's a simple thing to wear a mask to keep others safe because you're respecting and honoring people around you, people you don't know. And to, for whatever reason, not wear a mask and spread the disease around, you're just being a thorn in the side of society. You're endangering your tribe. It's not okay. And it's like, I don't like wearing a mask, but I have to keep my family safe, to keep my coworkers safe, to keep my friends and family safe. It's all part of being in that tribal setting.
Yeah, absolutely. And that is very true. Now, with the generalizations aside, how do you apply this to your practice as a Gaulish polytheist?
As a Gaulish polytheist, like I said before, hospitality is one of those key virtues that you see in a lot of different cultures, a lot of different mythologies, the Havamal, various myths and legends. So when when you apply Oigetocariâ to your personal practice, you are honoring the gods in that way. Hospitality, respect for your tribe, respect for society, it is a way to honor the deities, the deivoi, whatever deity you follow. That's how I see it, at least. How about yourself, Brenagara?
Much the same way. For me, being able to have a place to offer and open up and be able to give people that place where they can go that is a safe space for them as whoever they are, for me, honors all of my deities. It honors all of the deivoi. And that's how I try and work it in. It is often very patience trying for me because generally I'm not a person who likes to be around other people. I am very much an introvert who spends most of my time alone. So for me, it's hard because I do have to open up for it.
I'm not really a people person either. I'm very much introverted myself because of my work and other things. I do interact socially with people. I would prefer to just do what I do now, which is be social online, because that way I can just click off. There's not a whole lot of awkwardness. But that's neither here nor there. I live in a tiny town in Washington, and I do not really know anyone in this town. But I am still hospitable. I'm still kind. I'm still generous. I show respect. And I try to keep my town and my tribe, essentially, whether I know them or not. They are my tribe. They are part of this. I am part of the society. And I try to help it, benefit it, keep it safe.
I agree. All right, I think that about sums up episode 3 for us. Please remember to tune in on the 15th of every month. That's when we release our episodes. Episode 4 is coming up. Is going to be The More You Know. Who Were the Gauls? A Brief History. You can find our socials. Twitter is GaulCast Podcast, and Facebook and Instagram are both just GaulCast. You can also find us at GaulCast.com, where you can find a link to our Patreon. Also, thank you to our very first Patreon patron, Jay Internus. We appreciate your support. Thank you so very much. You'll also see all of our socials down below in the description for the episode, as well as a link to our Patreon. So we look forward to seeing you guys again next month, and thank you for joining us.
Thanks again, and thank you, Jay Internus, for being a very first patron, whatever that word is.
Hello, everyone. Oigetocariâ here. I felt the need to put a little disclaimer in this episode. We're recording the night of the 13th, knowing that we had a very limited window to get the episode wrapped up for the 15th. And normally I have a backup mic just in case the Discord bot did not record me very well, which is exactly what happened. And lo and behold, I forgot to set up my backup mic. So, you're going to hear a lot of weird audio. I had to re-record kind of as I went through the day today, the 14th, because I need about a day to edit the recording. So we weren't able to just sit down and re-record it. A lot of organic stuff. I just didn't want to ruin it either. So I just replaced my end of the audio because Brenagara's was just fine, which was very beneficial. So you're going to definitely hear background noise from my work. You're going to hear my kids playing music in the background here and there. So just, forgive me for the poor audio quality on my end. I fixed it as best as I could. But it's still a good episode. I'm still really excited for it. I'm really hoping that you guys receive it well, despite kind of the weird audio issues I ran into. But, it is what it is, and I'm still proud of it. So without further ado, enjoy the show, everyone.